Hey guys, tonight we step into a village so cold your eyelashes would probably snap in half if you blink too fast. Frost clings to every roof like it signed a long-term lease, and the air stings your skin the moment you breathe it in. You probably won't survive this, at least not without learning a few medieval tricks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step past the village boundary, and the first thing you hear is the crunch of frozen earth beneath your boots. It cracks like brittle pottery, reminding you that winter in medieval England was not just a season, it was a rival, a quiet, unblinking one. You stand for a moment, letting the cold nip at your ears, your nose, and every gap in your clothing you didn't know existed. The sun has already abandoned this place hours earlier, leaving behind a dim blue glow that barely pretends to be light. You take a slow breath, and it spills from your lips in thick white clouds, curling upward like steam escaping a kettle. As you move deeper between the crooked cottages, you're struck by the strange stillness. It's the kind of quiet that feels intentional, like everyone is conserving noise the way they conserve heat. A wooden shutter bangs once in the wind, and that single sound feels loud enough to echo across fields. You take another step, careful this time, because you're pretty sure if you fall on this ice, the ground wins. Village looks half asleep already. Doors sealed, windows shuttered, small lines of smoke drifting from chimneys like tired sighs. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then thinks better of it. You feel the cold stealing into your fingers despite your gloves, which makes you appreciate a mainstream historical fact. Medieval English winters were harsher than modern ones, not because temperatures were dramatically lower, but because people lacked insulation, central heating, or the luxury of complaining about drafts instead of being defeated by them. Houses leaked warmth so quickly that your breath fogs inside as easily as out. As you walk, your eyes catch the soft orange glow leaking through one cottage window. It trembles like someone is holding the flame in tired hands. Curious, you step closer, and your boots slide just slightly, reminding you that balance is a privilege. The door looks warped from years of cold pressure and hasty repairs. Its frame is stuffed with rags and tufts of straw, this village's version of weatherproofing. You reach out and brush the surface. The wood is so cold it feels metallic. Before you enter, the wind slips around your shoulders like a sarcastic little friend whispering, "Good luck in there." You push the door open anyway, and instantly you're wrapped in something that's not quite warmth, but not quite cold either. Let's call it survivable. Inside, the first sensation is smell: smoke, damp wool, stale air, a hint of boiled turnips. Every winter cottage aroma layered together like a reluctant perfume. The villagers glance at you, not startled, but observing the weird traveler who opened the door and voluntarily let the cold in. Well done. They're finishing their preparations for the night. A woman pats down the edges of a small hearth fire, coaxing the weak flames to life. A child rolls up a cloth to stuff into a wall crack. Draft blockers. Medieval edition. A man adjusts a heavy wooden bar across the door, not for security, but to keep the cold from sneaking inside, like an uninvited house spirit. You step further in and feel the faint warmth gathering near the hearth. It's thin, like someone poured a cup of warm tea into a very large room, but it's enough to soften your breath, enough to make your shoulders drop from around your ears. The villagers move with slow, practiced motions, all shaped by years of winter discipline. You learn quickly. The colder the season, the slower the gestures. Sudden movements waste warmth, or at least, that's what they believe. As you watch their routines, you notice something curious near the hearth. A small bundle wrapped in twine. At first you think it's dried herbs, but when you crouch down, you realize it's something far stranger. What looks like a tiny carved wooden figurine with little ash marks on its face. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. Some medieval families kept odd charms or tokens near the hearth to guard the fire at night, believing these objects warded off spirits that might steal the embers. Practical? No. Comforting? Absolutely. The howling wind outside rattles the shutters again, and someone in the room mutters a short phrase you recognize from scholarly debates. Historians still argue whether English villagers believed winter storms carried malice or simply misfortune. But standing here, listening to the wind claw at the wood, you understand why people imagined winter itself as a creature. The room grows dimmer. Someone trims the candle wick. Someone shifts a sleeping pallet closer to the hearth. Someone exhales slowly, as if settling into the long night. You feel your body relaxing too, mirroring theirs, easing into the rhythm of early winter sleep. The village outside fades into silence, the cold pressing at the walls, but mostly denied entry. Inside, you linger a moment longer, absorbing the soft crackle of the fire, the hum of quiet movement, the sense that this humble room is a warm island floating in a frozen world. Tonight, this is where your journey begins, right at the threshold between bitter cold and the fragile warmth people once fought to keep alive. You settle closer to the hearth, letting the faint heat press against your shins like a shy cat that hasn't decided whether it trusts you yet. Outside, the wind keeps rearranging itself into new creative insults, scraping along the cottage roof as if it's trying to file its nails on the thatch. Inside, though, everyone's attention shifts to the one thing that matters most on a medieval winter night: keeping the fire alive, not roaring, not blazing, just alive, like a fragile heartbeat. You watch the woman tending the coals, and you can tell this isn't casual work. Every movement is careful, almost ceremonial. She nudges a glowing ember from one side, tucks a fistful of bark around another, then cups her hands near the warmth as though greeting an old friend. Maintaining a fire in winter isn't a luxury, it's survival. Wrapped in ash and stubbornness, the man of the house retrieves a small wooden box, worn smooth from use. When he opens it, you see dark chunks inside, peat, dried moss, and the last scraps of firewood that haven't already turned to smoke this week. a mainstream historical fact slips into your mind. Medieval English villages often struggled with fuel shortages during harsh winters. Firewood wasn't just scarce, it was precious. Entire families rationed it with the same seriousness you might use to ration your last battery bar on a night when you forgot your charger. He selects one small piece of wood, just one, and places it carefully on the embers, not tossed, not dropped, positioned. You can almost hear his thoughts. Burn slowly. Please burn slowly. This is winter's quiet negotiation. You give it a whisper of heat, and it agrees not to freeze your toes off. Maybe you lean back slightly, and your shoulder grazes a wall so cold it could probably refrigerate dairy. That's the thing about medieval houses. They didn't trap heat so much as politely let it wander off. The fire is the room's only defense against turning everyone into sleepy ice sculptures, which is why, as the last bits of daylight evaporate, the nightly fire routine becomes almost sacred. Someone hands you a long, hollow metal tube. Well, hands may be generous. They sort of thrust it toward you like they're not totally sure you've earned it. You recognize it after a moment. A fire-blowing pipe, an odd but ingenious tool villagers used to direct breath into the embers without leaning so close that they accidentally singed their eyebrows. You lift it, place your lips to the cool metal, and blow gently. The coals brighten, glowing red, like tiny suns buried in ash. A small crackle answers you, and for one triumphant moment, you feel like the fire respects you. The family watches with the same expression you might use when teaching a toddler to hold a spoon. They're kind, though. No one laughs when you cough once after inhaling a bit too much smoke. The child nearest to you just nods in a way that says, "Beginner's luck. Try again." As more heat flickers into existence, the discussion turns to the night ahead, not conversation in the modern sense, more like small comments tossed into the quiet. They speak about whether the wind will shift, whether the embers will last until dawn, whether the cold will creep in from the roof beams again. It's small talk, but the stakes are huge. You notice a curious object beside the hearth. A smooth, round stone, already warm to the touch. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some medieval families heated stones in the fire, then wrapped them in cloth to use as rudimentary bed warmers. Portable pockets of heat. Medieval edition. You gently roll the stone in your hand, feeling it radiate warmth like a tiny, stubborn sun refusing to give up. The conversation shifts again, this time to superstition. One villager mentions the fire watchers, not people, but imagined spirits or omens believed to protect hearths. Another shakes their head, muttering that such things are nonsense. Historians still argue whether these winter superstitions were widely believed or simply quiet stories told on long nights. But in a place where darkness and cold feel almost alive, it makes sense that people tried to imagine something friendly watching over the flames. Someone snuffs out one of the two candles to conserve wax. The single flickering light now dances in the room like it's trying to stretch itself thin enough to reach every wall. Shadows grow longer, softer, shaped by the gentle sway of the flame. You feel your body follow the rhythm of the room. Slow breath in, slow breath out. A sleepy cadence settles around the family. Not quite rest, but not wakefulness either. The man leans over the fire again, adjusting the wood, checking the embers, making sure the glow pulses predictably. It's almost like tending a sleeping child. You can tell this is instinct to him, a nightly ritual learned so early he probably can't remember not knowing it. You think about your own nightly routines back home and how none of them, fortunately, carry the risk of freezing solid. The cottage feels warmer now, not warm, but warmer, enough for fingers to bend without complaint, enough for air to feel soft instead of sharp, enough for eyelids to grow heavier. And as you glance into the hearth one more time, you realize this tiny fire, carefully coaxed and guarded, is the thin line keeping this family wrapped in survival through the longest, quietest hours of winter. You shift slightly on the packed earth floor, letting the warmth from the fire stone in your lap seep deeper into your hands. The villagers are moving around you now with a kind of practiced softness, preparing the sleeping spaces the way you might straighten a blanket before bed. If your blanket, of course, were made of questionable wool and smelled faintly like barn. The room you're in doesn't expand much, but somehow it becomes a sleeping chamber, a hallway, and a family gathering place all at once. Space here is not measured in square feet. It's measured in survival. You watch as the woman spreads out a thick layer of straw across the wooden frame of what passes for the family bed. Not a mattress. Don't get fancy. Just straw. Sweet, scratchy, crackly straw, freshly turned over to shake out whatever small creatures considered it part-time housing. A mainstream historical fact drifts in. Medieval beds were usually simple wooden frames topped with straw pallets, often called paillasses, which had to be refreshed regularly because, well, insects enjoy real estate too. Lucky you. You step closer, running your fingers gently through the straw. It shifts under your hand, whispering like dry leaves. It doesn't feel comfortable, not by modern standards, but it feels warmish, which is the only metric that matters in a winter like this. The child of the house brings over a woolen sheet, thick, coarse, the color of storm clouds, and spreads it across the straw. The wool traps warmth, holds it, savors it. You imagine the relief of burrowing into it after a day of frozen fingers and wind-burned cheeks. A small joke slips into your mind. If you ever complained about your mattress being a little firm, this bed is here to challenge your entire worldview. The family begins settling in, and that's when you notice something else. They're very close. Not socially close, physically close. Everyone sleeps pressed together on the same straw pallet, forming a warm cluster the way penguins huddle in documentaries, except with fewer feathers and more suspicious foot smells. This was normal, expected, even necessary. Shared warmth kept bodies from dropping dangerously low in temperature. Your modern ideas about personal space? Yeah, you can go ahead and hang those on the non-existent coat rack by the imaginary door. One of the older villagers gestures for you to sit on the edge of the pallet. You do, feeling the straw flex beneath you. It's surprisingly supportive, like sitting on a slightly judgmental beanbag. The family begins arranging themselves. The smallest children in the middle, adults on the outside, like a human lasagna designed for maximum heat efficiency. You think back to something you read once, an odd, quirky tidbit. Some medieval households slept with dogs or even geese for added warmth, not because they loved the animals, though some did, but because the animals functioned as living, squawking space heaters. Tonight, this cottage doesn't have any professional goose therapists tucked into bed, but you can imagine how chaotic that must have been. Nothing says sleep tight like a goose honking at 3 a.m. because someone elbowed it. The wind outside swells, rattling the shutters again. A draft snakes along the floor, brushing your ankles like cold fingers. One of the villagers shivers, and the father mutters something under his breath. You catch only fragments, but it's clear he blames the northern wind. Historians still argue whether medieval people associated specific winds with spirits or omens. But right now, listening to that bitter gust hiss through the thatch, you understand how easy it would be to imagine winter as something ancient and watching. You pull your borrowed blanket tighter around your shoulders. It's heavy, dense, woven from wool thick enough to stand on its own if it got tired. The edges are frayed, but the fabric radiates warmth it has absorbed throughout the evening. Wool, as you're learning, is a miracle. It insulates even when damp. It resists cold like it has a personal vendetta against winter. You imagine medieval laundry day, which was rare for fabrics like this, and you wisely decide not to imagine the smell. As everyone settles deeper into their sleeping spots, the room shifts into that liminal state between night activity and true rest. Someone coughs softly, straw rustles, the fire crackles once, and then quiets, conserving itself for the long hours. You notice the mother placing the warmed stone beneath the wool layers at the foot of the bed, a medieval foot warmer, genius, and absolutely necessary when your toes have been threatening mutiny all day. You tuck your feet near it, feeling the gentle heat spreading into your soles. It's like stepping into a warm bath, if the bath were made of stone and blankets, and the faint smell of sheep. The warmth radiating through the palate spreads slowly, like honey poured across a table, thick, sticky, deliberate. Your breathing begins to sync with the room. Slow in, slow out. The child next to you wiggles once, then settles, their small hand brushing your sleeve in that instinctive, sleepy way shared by children across centuries. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the room surround you. The sound of the wind fades. The warmth of bodies grows stronger. The fire hums softly in the background like a contented cat. You're aware of every sensation: the tickle of straw beneath the wool, the weight of the blanket, the air warming slowly with each shared exhale. You feel, oddly, comforted. And as you drift deeper into this medieval nighttime rhythm, you finally understand why shared beds weren't just a habit. They were an anchor against the cold, a human shield against winter's long, icy reach. You stretch your toes cautiously beneath the blanket, feeling the last fading warmth of the heated stone tucked near your ankles. The room has settled into that deep nighttime stillness, where every small sound seems louder than it should be. The soft hiss of the fire shrinking inward, the slow rustle of someone readjusting their straw cushion, the distant creak of timbers shifting as the cottage braces itself against another gust of winter wind. It's the kind of silence that feels old, like it belonged to the house long before you arrived. You open your eyes just enough to see the dim shape of the room around you. And now, as your senses adjust, you begin to notice the quiet tricks the family uses to trap warmth, the little pieces of ingenuity tucked into every corner. For a place that leaks heat like a nervous liar leaks secrets, these people have built an entire system of winter defense. Along the wall nearest the bed hangs a massive woolen curtain, so thick and heavy it could probably double as armor in a pinch. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Wealthier medieval homes often used bed curtains to trap body heat, turning their sleeping areas into tiny, insulated microclimates. But even in humble cottages like this one, families hung thick cloth along drafty walls or around shared beds to mimic the effect. You reach out to touch it. The wool is coarse, scratchy, dense. Your fingers sink in just enough to know it has spent years absorbing the warmth and wear of winter after winter. The curtain doesn't just block drafts. It creates a small, almost private cocoon around the bed. One of the villagers explained earlier that the curtain keeps the good warm from escaping. You found that phrase strangely poetic, like warmth is a shy creature that needs help staying put. And honestly, given how determined the cold is tonight, you believe it. A soft shape moves in the dim light, and you see one of the children padding barefoot across the floor. You wince instinctively. Your own toes curl in protest, but the child doesn't seem fazed. They crouch at the far corner of the wall and press their hand against it, testing, checking, maybe listening for drafts the way you would check for a breeze sneaking through a cracked window. After a moment, they wedge a rolled piece of old cloth into the gap between wall and floorboards, a medieval draft stopper, effective if not glamorous. Think of it as home insulation, the rustic edition. You look around again, noticing more layers everywhere. Bundles of flax stuffed between roof beams, bits of cloth tucked into window frames, wool blankets draped over chests and benches, even small animal skins near the door. A quirky tidbit drifts across your mind. In especially cold regions, some families hung tapestries not for decoration, but purely to keep warm. A bare wall was essentially a cold sink. A decorated wall, instant insulation. Medieval people were basically interior designers, but with a survival twist. Your attention returns to the bed curtain as one of the adults adjusts it slightly, letting in just enough space for the fire's last glow to peek through. The fabric sways, then settles again, creating a small envelope of still, warm air around all of you. It feels almost luxurious, like someone upgraded your sleeping situation from barely not freezing to marginally cozy. Historians still argue whether medieval homes were intentionally designed with insulation in mind, or whether people simply improvised endlessly until they found what worked. After a few nights like this, you're convinced the answer is yes. They improvised because they had to, and over time, necessity became tradition. The fire is nearly gone now, A few determined embers, glowing like sleepy eyes. The father rises and checks the hearth again, stacking ash over the glowing coals to bank them for morning. The idea is simple. Smother them just enough to slow the burn, but not enough to extinguish them entirely. Tomorrow, with a few puffs of breath and a handful of kindling, the fire can be renewed. You know the technique works because earlier tonight you tried it yourself with mixed results and one generous coughing fit. The temperature drops a little as the light fades. You pull the blanket closer, its wool heavy across your shoulders. Someone behind you shifts closer, searching for shared warmth. You don't mind. There's something deeply human about this quiet huddle, about the way everyone instinctively leans into the center of the bed, like petals folding inward at night. You breathe in, and you catch the familiar smell of wool, earthy, warm, and faintly grassy, like a sheep tried to give you a hug and then wandered off. Another gust of wind rattles the shutters, and for a moment, the curtain next to you flutters. The cold sneaks through like a mischievous child poking you with an icy finger. You flinch, and someone chuckles softly. It's a tired laugh, but warm. You can't help smiling into the darkness, and slowly, gently, you feel yourself melting further into the coziness of this improvised insulation system. The curtain blocks the worst drafts. The blankets trap shared warmth. The straw beneath you molds to your shape, surprisingly comforting in its own rustic way. The wool above you feels like a shield woven from stubborn hope and sheep fur. You let out a long exhale, the kind that carries the weight of the day away. The room grows softer around you, softer in sound, softer in light, softer in temperature. Every layer, every curtain, every piece of cloth has done its job. The cold still prowls outside, but here, inside this small pocket of warmth, the night feels just a little less sharp. And with the curtain closing you in like a slow embrace, you drift a little deeper into the medieval understanding of winter. You don't fight the cold. You outsmart it. You wake, or rather, you drift into that hazy half-awareness that happens when you've been warm for just long enough to forget that the world outside is basically one giant refrigerated disappointment. The cottage is still dark, but something has shifted. A faint hum, a low murmur, and then you feel it. A soft, rhythmic heat pulsing along the floorboards beneath you. Not human warmth, not fire warmth. Something. Furrier, you open your eyes just a little, and there they are. Animals, not in the bed, thankfully, although after learning about Goose sleeping last section, you wouldn't put anything past medieval ingenuity, but clustered near the interior wall. A shaggy dog curled into a perfect circle. A couple of sheep huddled close enough that their bodies steam gently in the cold air. Even a small calf, blinking slow, sleepy blinks. This cottage is less of a single-family home and more of a cozy interspecies sleepover. A mainstream historical fact nudges your thoughts awake. In harsh winters, animals were often brought inside or slept in attached byres to share warmth with the household. Humans and livestock weren't separated the way we expect today. Warmth was communal, and heat was too valuable to waste out in the barn. Tonight, You feel that truth radiating through every plank beneath you. The dog shifts, thumping its tail, just once, before deciding movement is overrated and returning to its important responsibilities as a fluffy radiator. One of the sheep lets out a gentle huff. You smile into your blanket. It's oddly comforting, a little strange, a little smelly, but comforting. Someone beside you stirs. The father sits up slowly, rubbing his face with both hands like he's trying to remember how mornings work. A moment later, he leans over the edge of the bed and whistles softly to the dog, who lifts its head with an expression that clearly says, "Why are we awake? Are we sure this is wise?" Fair question. As everyone begins the morning shuffle, you catch sight of the door leading to the byre, an attached space where more of the family's animals spent the night. The air from that doorway is noticeably warmer, almost muggy, carrying the unmistakable smell of livestock, musk blended with hay. Not exactly lavender scented, but undeniably effective. You think back to your own life, where heated floors means a fancy perk instead of a cow politely sharing its radiating body warmth through wooden boards. Perspective is everything. One of the children toddles toward the byre door and peeks inside. Their face brightens instantly. You hear the soft moo of a cow greeting them with sleepy enthusiasm, probably hoping the child brought breakfast. Instead, the child just pats the cow's nose, murmuring to it with the kind of affection usually reserved for pets. In winter, animals weren't just tools, they were partners in survival. The mother rises next, tugging on her outer wool layer. She wraps it tight around her shoulders, then checks the banked hearth. She kneels by it and gently brushes the ash aside, revealing a smoldering ember that glows like a tiny red planet. A sigh of relief leaves the room, quiet but shared. That ember means fire today. Fire means breakfast. Breakfast means morale. But before she adds kindling, she glances toward the byre door again, as if checking for a sign. You've noticed this pattern. Everything here revolves around warmth, preserving it, stealing it, sharing it, coaxing it back to life. Even done depends on it. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. In some regions, farmers believed cows sensed weather changes before humans, and a restless cow meant a colder day ahead. As you watch her glance at the animals again, you realize that maybe it wasn't superstition so much as experience. Animals know things, especially when those things involve freezing. Slowly, the room brightens as early light squeezes through cracks in the shutters. Not golden, not warm, more like a pale, frosty blue, the color of "don't get your hopes up." Still, it's enough to reveal the shapes of the room. Wool blankets draped everywhere, straw flattened in the sleeping pallet, the bed curtain hanging limp now that its work for the night is done. The father stands, stretching, then steps into the byre. You hear him whisper to the animals, his voice gentle in that way people use for beings who depend on them. He checks their water, frozen at the edges. He checks the hay, frozen at the edges. He checks the trough, frozen entirely. He sighs the sigh of a man who has accepted that winter is an unpaid coworker who contributes nothing and ruins everything as he works. The mother adds kindling to the fire. The ember flares softly, spreading light like a promise. A moment later, the hearth catches, and warmth begins pushing its way through the room again. Not fast, not strong, but steadily. Historians still argue whether early mornings in medieval England were seen as hopeful or simply inevitable. But as you watch this family move through their practiced routine, it feels like both. There's hope in the rekindling of the fire, but inevitability in the long list of chores ahead. The children nestle near the hearth now, rubbing their hands together. The calf pokes its head around the byre door, clearly hoping breakfast has manifested. The dog plops itself directly in the warmest spot on the floor, like it has tenure. And you take a slow breath and absorb this strange, beautiful morning scene. People, animals, warmth, survival, all woven together into a rhythm older than memory. You can feel the cold day waiting just beyond the walls. But in here, for this brief moment, warmth is winning. You wrap your blanket tighter and let yourself enjoy the last lingering heat as the medieval morning officially begins. Morning settles into the cottage slowly, like it's trying not to startle anyone. The light leaking through the shutters is still thin and cold, and the breath from every villager hangs softly in the air like ghostly speech bubbles. You pull your blanket aside and stretch your legs, feeling that delightful combination of slightly rested and definitely slept on straw. But today, you're not staying in this humble cottage. Today, you're stepping into a very different kind of winter night, one only a small slice of medieval society ever experienced. You step outside, your boots crunching through crusted frost, and begin walking toward the manor house beyond the village. It rises in the distance like a dark wooden spine against the sky. Not quite a castle, not quite a cottage, something in between. The sort of dwelling where comfort is possible rather than hypothetical. The closer you get, the clearer the differences become. Thicker walls, sturdier beams, glass panes and a few windows. Decorative, impractical, expensive. You feel your shoulders relax just looking at it. Wealth does that. A servant opens the door for you, and the warmth that hits your face feels practically luxurious compared to the cottage life draft fest you just left. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Wealthy households in medieval England often had unclosed fireplaces, actual fireplaces with chimneys, and used better quality wood, allowing for warmer, more controlled rooms. And yes, controlled heat here means not freezing every toe off. You follow the servant inside, and your eyes adjust to a new style of winter living. The floors are strewn with thick rush mats. The walls are decorated with tapestries, heavy ones, depicting hunts, saints, and the highly ambitious eyebrows of long-dead noblewomen. These aren't just for show. They're insulation disguised as art. You run your fingers along one tapestry's woven edge and feel a dense, velvety warmth radiating back. A woman in fine wool clothing guides you toward the sleeping chamber. Her gown swishes across the floor like it has personal opinions about quietude. Inside the bedroom, you find exactly what you expected and yet weren't prepared for. The bed, not a pallet, not straw, a capital B bed. The The frame is carved wood, tall and imposing, like furniture that knows it costs more than your yearly salary. Thick wool curtains hang from the canopy, enclosing the sleeping area in a private fortress of warmth. You gently pull the curtain aside, and the air inside is noticeably warmer, like stepping into a separate room carved out of coziness. The bedding is layered in a way your straw-filled self considers borderline decadent. First, a feather mattress, soft, plush, gently sinking beneath your weight as you press your palm into it. Then woolen blankets, dyed deep shades of red and green. And finally, the piece de resistance, fur coverings, actual fur, several of them, thick, glossy, heavy, radiating a warmth that could probably shame a modern heated blanket. You lie down on the edge, just for research, obviously, and the softness cradles you instantly. Your body forgets how to be tense. A quiet, involuntary, "oh wow," escapes your mouth before you can stop it. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind. In noble households, it wasn't uncommon for feather beds to be so prized that they were included in wills. Imagine loving your bed so much you legally assign it to someone. That's devotion. The mistress of the house explains how nighttime worked here. Servants warmed the bed by placing heated stones or even small metal pans filled with hot coals between the sheets before sleep. Bed warming devices, primitive but effective. They removed them before the master and mistress entered, leaving behind a pleasant wave of pre-installed warmth. Honestly, you start to feel jealous. Medieval privilege smells a lot like gently toasted bedsheets. As she speaks, you catch her glancing at the bed curtains again. She pulls one closed to demonstrate the insulation, and you instantly feel the air grow still, peaceful, wrapped like being tucked inside a warm whisper. When all the curtains are drawn, the bed becomes a capsule of heat, blocking drafts from the rest of the room. It's a small world with its own climate, one you can't help but respect. Historians still argue whether bed curtains were primarily practical or also symbolic, markers of status and intimacy. Standing here, in this self-contained warmth cocoon, you suspect the answer is yes, practical, prestigious, and definitely a lot warmer than sleeping next to a goat. You explore the rest of the room as evening settles. A small brazier sits in the corner, radiating slow heat. A pair of wool-lined slippers waits by the bedside. Even the chamber pot has a cloth cover, because nothing kills the nighttime mood like a frigid porcelain encounter. The wind outside picks up, but it sounds softer here, like it's been downgraded from howling beast to mildly frustrated sigh. The thick walls absorb the worst of it. The tapestry shivers slightly, but don't yield. Candlelight flickers gold across the fur blankets, and the bed waits like a promise that tonight comfort wins. You settle onto the feather mattress fully now, letting the softness hug your back. The wool curtains sway slightly as the house shifts. You pull one closed, then another. The chamber dims into the warm half-darkness of a safe winter night. No drafts, no shivering, no icy toes plotting rebellion. Just layered warmth, quiet luxury, and the soft rhythm of a house that can afford to sleep comfortably. You breathe out into the unclosed air, and the warmth stays. So do you. You lie still for a moment in the manor bed, wrapped in layers of warmth so extravagant you're pretty sure your bones are considering early retirement. But eventually, curiosity tugs you back to your feet. You slip out from under the fur coverings, step into the manor hallway, and quietly make your way toward the outer rooms. You've seen how the wealthy sleep in winter, but you haven't yet listened to what medieval nights felt like. The sounds, the fears, the strange quiet habits that only appear when the world is frozen in darkness. You step outside the manor and head back toward the village, drawn by the soft glow of hearth fires flickering behind shutters. Night has returned fully now, dark, deep, and endless, like someone took the sky and wrung every last drop of daylight from it. Your breath curls upward in pale ribbons. Every sound feels magnified. The crunch of frost beneath your boots sounds like cracking glass. The faint rustling of thatch in the cottages feels like whispered conversation. You find yourself back near the small homes clustered around the green, each one dimly lit from within. This is where the nighttime personality of the village comes alive, slow, careful, watchful. Medieval people weren't afraid of the dark exactly, but they respected it the way you respect a wild animal, cautiously, politely, and with mild suspicion that it's judging you. A mainstream historical fact hums through your mind. Medieval nights were incredibly dark. No street lamps, no ambient city glow, no glow from screens or devices, only fire and moonlight. People's senses sharpened, routine slowed, and imagination, well, imagination did whatever imagination does when everything is quiet and cold and moving shadows look suspicious. You come upon a cottage where the family hasn't yet fallen fully asleep. Their movements are soft silhouettes behind the window cloth. From inside, you hear murmured voices, not frightened but attentive, and then you notice something. They're listening, listening to the house, listening to the night, listening to sounds you barely noticed before. Wind shifting, that's normal. A branch scraping the wall, normal-ish. A distant owl call, muffled by cold air, definitely owl. Probably a bucket settling on frozen ground. Suspicious at first, then rationalized. This was nightly winter entertainment before bedtime podcasts existed. The father of the household sits awake a little longer, his silhouette outlined by fading firelight. You watch him tilt his head toward the roof beam, just slightly, like he's making sure the cold hasn't crept in anywhere new. People once believed drafts weren't just weather. They could be signs, warnings. If a strange cold current moved through the home at night, someone might mutter, "The wind walks tonight," with a seriousness that makes you reconsider every creaky noise in your own house at 2 a.m. A quirky tidbit drifts into your memory. Some medieval households kept small bells or charms near windows to detect unwanted spirits or just the unwelcome arrival of frigid air. Because nothing kills the nighttime mood like a ghost or a draft. And sometimes it was hard to tell which was which. You step closer as the father finally settles into the bedding beside his family. Just before lying down, he performs a small gesture, touching the wooden beam above his head. You almost miss it. A tiny protective habit, maybe superstition, maybe tradition. Historians still argue whether these gestures were religious, practical, or simply inherited behaviors from older customs. But in the quiet of a winter night, it feels meaningful all the same. The fire sputters once, then slips into a steady glow. The room darkens. Inside the cottage, the nighttime chorus of medieval sleep begins. Soft snores, the rustle of wool, the sound of someone shifting because a straw stalk has decided to poke them in the ribs. A child whimpers once, then sighs. The mother murmurs something comforting without waking. The dog in the entryway snuffles as it dreams about chasing something slow and easily defeated, like a confused chicken. You sit along the wall, listening with them. The cold presses against the shutters, testing the house. The house groans back like an elderly uncle settling into a chair, tired but resilient. Then the wind sweeps low across the thatch roof, a long, lingering sound, and instantly the mood inside shifts. People still, even if they're half asleep, they feel it, that old instinct, winter's breath brushing the walls. In that moment, you understand something important. Nights weren't just time to rest. They were time to endure, time to be still and safe and quiet, time to hope the warmth held until morning. But there were softer moments too. The mother hums a faint tune. You recognize it as the same melody she hummed earlier while stirring the evening stew. A lullaby, maybe, or simply a habit passed from her own mother. The sound blends with the crackle of the embers, forming a gentle rhythm that warms the air more than the fire does. You lean your head back against the wall, feeling your eyelids grow heavy. The night outside may be full of shadows and superstition, but inside, wrapped in wool and the sleepy breathing of a family who has done this for generations, you feel strangely safe. The cold can whisper all it wants. You're not listening anymore.